Much like the source material Journey to the West, where the Monkey King's son Wukong must overcome 81 trials to complete his adventure, the destined hero in Black Myth Wukong must conquer over 80 boss fights to fulfill his destiny. With so many boss fights to tackle, all of which you can learn the best strategies to beat in IGN's Black Myth Wukong guide, we figured it was time to rank the hardest boss fights in the game. With so many to choose from, it was hard to whittle down the list to 25, but ultimately, these are the bosses that pushed us to nearly break our controllers. Okay, Mad Tiger is one of the easiest bosses on this list, but he's still no cakewalk if you're not a ninja monkey ready to kick ass. There's no finesse to fighting Mad Tiger. The big fella charges straight at you and can take big chunks off your health if he lands a hit. So time your dodges to perfection and then attack. Simple. Well, kinda.
I have yet to avenge my father.
The Wandering Wight is an early optional boss that just sort of wanders, hence the name, around the first area of the game. What gives the Wandering Wight a spot on this list is not so much the fight itself, but just how he's just sort of there. So much so that you might mistake him for a regular, tough enemy until you attack him and realize that he has a boss health bar. It's therefore likely that you'll die at the hands of the Wandering Wight on your first couple of tries, but he's a sign of things to come. Boss battles in Black Myth Wukong are sometimes hidden, but often they're very much in plain sight and can happen at any time in the game. Don't say we didn't warn you. Kang Jin Star is an unassuming boss at first. Her glowing eyes are kinda weird, but surely she can't be that dangerous, right? Oh, holy shit, she can turn into a giant dragon that spits lightning death from the skies. In fact, all of her lightning attacks deal a ton of damage, and because she has both long and close range attacks, it's actually pretty tricky to land a decent hit on her. Plus, like Black Myth's other lightning-based bosses, her attacks are rapid fire, so you better nail your timing, otherwise you'll get hit by a thunder blast that will fry Monkey's fur in a flash.
Master's right. Monkeys are set in their ways.
When I first saw the Supreme Inspector, I mistook him for a giant rooster, but the reality is much worse. He's a winged man with a hand for a head, and it's every bit as gross as it sounds. It is tough too, and has a bunch of attacks that slowly chip away at your health unless you're able to quickly stun him. And watch out for his burning ring too, which, by the way, you can blow away with the plantain fan. This adorable warthog carries a rake and looks like something from a Disney movie, but he's actually a ferocious little shit. He wallows in a giant pool of mud, which makes it really hard to move around and dodge his attacks. Worse still, he ditches the cuteness for the second phase of the fight, transforming into a grotesque boar that gouges with foot-long tusks. Survive that, and the final part of the battle sees him melting into the mud and charging you down as a huge amorphous fish thing that does massive damage. No thank you. Despite ditching its human form and going full dragon right from the start, Red Long is the easiest of the dragon bosses. Like Kang Jin Star and the other dragon bosses, he wields devastating lightning attacks, but it's his speed that you really need to watch out for. Keep dodging and focus attacks on the bells on his back to stun him temporarily, giving you a few seconds to tear him a new one. What do Red Long and Black Long have in common? Apart from being a giant pain in the butt when it comes to fighting them, not much, but one is a long slithering dragon, and this guy is a chubby pigman with a dragon head. Dual-wielding lightning maces, Black Long is an optional boss in Chapter 2, but trust us, you should level up before you even think about challenging him. His electrical attacks are more than just visually stunning and do heavy damage whether you're close or far away. So dodge through his attacks, roll up behind him, and stick your staff where the sun doesn't shine. White-Clad Noble is the first multi-stage boss in Black Myth Wukong, so just when you think he's down, he gets right back up again.
I get knocked down, but I get up again.
He also looks like an old man the first time around, but then comes back as a crazy looking half snake man thing. The key to beating White-clad Noble is patience. Rushing head-on is almost a guaranteed death wish, but dodging his attacks from afar and waiting for the right moment to strike is a surefire way to put him down. Twice. Tiger Vanguard is a badass tiger martial artist who you fight in a pool of blood. Yes, it's as cool as it sounds. He hits harder and faster than any of the bosses you've previously faced too, so make sure you have strong gear and a load of buffs to help in the fight. Have you ever played against someone in a fighting game like Tekken that just button mashes and seems like they never give you a chance to actually press a button yourself? That's kind of what it's like fighting the Emerald Arm Mantis. This boss attacks extraordinarily fast and is extremely aggressive, granting you precious few opportunities to turn the tables and land hits yourself. Fortunately, all your spells work great here. Immobilize can stop it in its tracks, giving you opportunities to stagger. Most of its attacks can be reflected with Rock Solid, and Pluck of Many allows you to overwhelm it with clones that all deal big damage. If the Dusk Veil was a member of your family, it would be the creepy relative that no one wants to sit next to. I mean, just look at it. No thanks. This skeletal Wendigo-like monster has ferocious, unrelenting attacks that make this boss fight far more challenging than it has any right to be. His wild swings and combos are difficult to read too, making him a particularly tricky boss to get the better of. Also, every attack, particularly in the second stage, has some kind of twist to it. Dodge to swing? Doesn't matter. The spikes that shoot out of its arms will tear you to shreds while you're busy feeling smug. Honestly, it would be great if you could just leave the cloud-treading deer well alone. It's just there, minding its own business in the middle of a grassy field, but he stands in the way of the Destined One becoming a legend, and so, it must die. This four-legged giant hits like a horse, literally. Its hind leg kicks out with enough force to break your spine in a split second. What makes it extra challenging though is the fact that the first phase has you dealing with potentially getting frozen by its frost-enhanced attacks, and the second phase switches gears to force you to handle poison, so you gotta be prepared to deal with both status ailments. Unlike some bosses on this list, Stone Monkey isn't what you would usually call a two-phase boss. Rather, it's a boss that evolves into the Great Sage's broken shell, and while its second form is the more formidable of the two, the Stone Monkey is no pushover either. For starters, he's more than twice the size of our furry hero, and is super aggressive too, but his attacks are crude and can be dodged fairly easily. He's way tougher after he becomes the Great Sage's broken shell, and his ranged attacks like the Ring of Fire are nasty. What is it with this game and burning rings? Okay, this guy looks freaking scary. He's properly huge and carries around a Buddha head the size of an SUV. The Yellow Wind Sage will be a proving ground for a lot of players, as it's the first properly tough boss in Black Myth Wukong. Wandering White was tough for an early optional boss that just wanders around. The White-clad Noble was tough because it's your first time having to pace yourself for a two-phase fight. But the Yellow Wind Sage is difficult in just about every way. It hits like a truck, it's very tricky about the timing of all of its attacks to make them difficult to dodge, and if you don't have the Wind Tamer vessel, you should really get the Wind Tamer vessel, you'll have to deal with encroaching sandstorms throughout the second phase as well that make it even harder to land hits on him. We'd shake this guy's hand for having such an awesome name if he wasn't such an asshole. Captain Wise Voice is a weird looking thing, with horns and arms and legs sticking out in every direction. It's insanely tough too, and even your strongest attacks barely touch his health bar. But the real thing that makes this battle difficult is the fact that he can shrink your maximum life bar by half, allowing you to take less damage and dramatically reducing the effectiveness of your healing gourd. Oh, and don't forget the laser that shoots out of its metal orb brain thing. So yeah, great name, and also one of the toughest and most annoying bosses you'll encounter. Now that we're in the top 10, things are starting to heat up. While many might mock Yellowbrow's big, bushy eyebrows, we're gonna give him the respect he deserves because, frankly, he's a dick. And a hard one at that. Armed with an electric mace and an ornate flask, Yellowbrow has hard-hitting, area-of-effect attacks that send shockwaves across the entire area. But the real challenge comes later, when Yellowbrow turns to gold, making him practically impervious to attacks. It's a long and grueling battle, compounded by the fact that his attacks take chunks out of your health, while it feeling like you're barely even hurting him, no matter how good your build is. Welcome to one of the hardest fights in the whole game. The Yaka King wields two extremely large blades, which sprout out of his arms and grow bigger as the fight goes on, which means it can be tough to build up a rhythm and makes it trickier to time dodges. Even worse, a single hit is enough to take a good chunk of your health, so good luck surviving for more than a few minutes. The Yaka King excels at close quarters combat, which is bad news for you because you have to get right in his grill to do damage. Why couldn't he be long-sighted and struggle to land a hit? But between sharp area-of-effect attacks that force you to dodge backwards, the Yaka King is a battle that requires precision and patience to come close to beating. Do you always pick a fight with fishermen sitting peacefully by the edge of the lake, waiting for the next bite? If so, then Cyan Long is right up your street. This optional boss is a large, sword-wielding dragon swordsman who can fly through the air. Majestically, I might add. He really is a sight to behold. His sword strike is also hard to dodge, meaning the window to land a good hit is small, so don't waste your opportunity to hit him when it arises. Like the other Long fights, Cyan Long also has electrical attacks, giving him a deadly edge both close and long range. Despite all that, he's still not the toughest Long fight in the game. But before we get to that, this fearsome Meowguai is a fiery berserker whose non-stop attacks means you'll be spending more time dodging than hitting. Similar to the Dusk Veil, Bishui golden-eyed beast incessantly comes at you with his mighty fists and fire breath, leaving you with hardly any breathing room. Honestly, this guy never gives it a rest, and genuinely, it feels like there's no opening to retaliate. But if you fancy having a little fun with this hot-headed monster, bait him into a nearby ice cave to cool him off. This changes his fire attacks to ice, which are much easier to deal with. And here he is, the hardest Long in Black Myth Wukong. Like his peers, Yellow Long has wildly tricky attacks that are tough to dodge, but that's not the main reason you'll struggle. During his second phase, Yellow Long will constantly make it seem like you need to dodge, only to hold his attacks a few seconds before the real swing of his halberd comes. If you haven't mastered dodging, then you're gonna be stuck on this brute for hours. If you thought Tiger Vanguard and Mad Tiger were tough, you haven't seen anything yet. Yint Tiger is a giant tiger-headed warrior who carries a greatsword the size of a bus. No, seriously, look at that thing. The duel that ensues is a total epic, and unsurprisingly for the number 5 on this list, is also one of the hardest fights in the game. Yint Tiger's large swings are fast and hit like a truck, a common theme for Wukong's best fights, but Yint Tiger's speed is what sets him apart from similar bosses. His ability to disappear and then reappear out of nowhere makes this challenging boss fight also one of the best in the entire game. And trading blows with Yint Tiger feels like pure kung fu cinema. It's hard, but man, it's so good. Scorpion Lord is a giant scorpion man, and yeah, count me out. Like the nasty little arachnid he's based on, Scorpion Lord's giant tail, topped with a poisonous sting, is his deadliest attribute, and he's able to swing it to hit you. He also has a single giant pincer, but while he might only have one, it's powerful enough to pop your head like a pus-filled pimple. So don't let him get a grip. That's easier said than done because Scorpion Lord is aggressive with a capital Ah! And if you make a single mistake, you'll be severely punished.
My revenge! I can no longer.
Hey, you know what? Screw the 100-eyed Taoist Master. This half-centipede abomination not only murders a spider mom in front of her own daughters, his second phase becomes nearly impossible without the help of a sacred side quest item. Armed with magical abilities, poison breath, a giant sword, and a bad attitude, Hundred-Eyed Taoist Master is one of the hardest bosses in Black Myth Wukong. And that's saying a lot because you literally get help from giant spiders when you fight him. Some of the best boss fights in video games are the ones that tell a story through gameplay and mechanics. And that's exactly what the final boss battle, not counting the true ending, of Black Myth Wukong does so effectively. It's a passing of the torch between the empty shell of the old Sun Wukong and the Destined One. The fight begins with you fighting what is essentially just a husk of Wukong, but as the fight continues, more and more of the old Wukong starts to return to the Stone Monkey, until eventually you're fighting a near carbon copy of the Monkey King, who uses all of your own abilities against you, to great and often amusing effect. During our playthrough, there was a moment where I tried to take a sip from my flask, only for the boss to immobilize me mid-drink, before slowly walking over, grabbing the flask, and then drinking it himself. It's one of the coolest moments of any boss battle in recent memory, even if its appeal does wear thin after you've been stuck for hours on end without a way to skip the animation. Finally, we've made it to the hardest boss in Black Myth Wukong. Erlang, the Secret Divinity, is the secret final boss of the game, but you probably also recognize him from the tutorial boss from the opening cinematic. But this isn't a tutorial anymore. As the final boss, Erlang comes at you full power, summoning huge weapons while remaining relatively unharmed thanks to his durable shield. Since Erlang summons numerous gigantic weapons beyond just his spear, it's hard to predict his movements. He might summon a giant axe to pummel you into the ground, or a giant lightning sword that deals massive area of effect damage. He can even take a swipe at you as a freaking tiger. Erlang has a near limitless arsenal of weapons and spells, and it'll take a level of cunning on your part to counter, dodge, and survive all of them, which is why we've ranked him as the hardest boss in Black Myth Wukong. That is our list of the top 25 bosses in Black Myth Wukong. Game Science went above and beyond to craft epic and difficult fights to pit against our destined hero. But overcoming each fight also comes with immense satisfaction and some really great loot. So it's worth steeling your resolve to try and defeat all the bosses in Black Myth Wukong. If your favorite boss isn't on this list, let us know which ones we missed in the comments. And be sure to check out our Black Myth Wukong guide for tips on how to defeat these enemies if you're feeling stuck. And for everything else, keep it here on IGN.